Hello and welcome to the Action Network Podcast, UFC Betting Preview. I'm Sean Zerillo, joined today by Billy Ward to help you break down a 13 fight card for UFC Vancouver. We're here to give you our best bets, favorite underdogs, top props, and more. And if you'd like to instantly tell some of the bets that we discuss on today's show, make sure to find the quick slip links both in the podcast and video description or visit actionnetwork.com/bet now. Main event, Reinier de Ridder against Brendan Allen in the middleweight division. Allen on short notice in place of Anthony Fluffy Hernandez. And I do think the short notice factor is going to play into the proceedings here. I like RDR to finish this fight, as do you, Billy. But I like RDR to finish this one in the later rounds, potentially rounds 3, 4, or 5 at 10 to 1, 15 to 1, and 22 to 1, respectively. I also like RDR by KO as opposed to submission at plus 400. I projected that prop closer to plus 300. I think Allen will be competitive here early. He's probably the more technical striker of the pair. He's also 5 years younger. But in a fight that was even on a full camp, I would give RDR the better cardio. And considering Allen is coming in on short notice, I also view him as the less durable of the two fighters. I think RDR's physicality, his size advantage, ultimately proves the difference. 2 inches taller, 3 inch reach advantage. As I said, I expect Allen to be competitive early, but once they start grappling, once they start utilizing energy, once RDR starts using his physicality against Allen, I expect him to tire out his younger opponent. I expect him to get on top, land some ground and pound. Allen tries to escape, ends up putting himself in worse position, and gets himself finished, or potentially gets himself finished on the feet as he slows as well. Now, RDR hasn't fought a ton of UFC contests to this point, but in the time he has spent in the cage, outstruck opponents at distance by zero point 0.8 strikes per minute. Allen outstruck by his opponents at 0.6 strikes per minute. So in terms of the distance striking differential, RDR on paper has an advantage of 1.5 distance significant strikes landed per minute. And in the grappling, RDR in his UFC career, 76% control rate. Allen just a 55% control rate. Used to seeing him on bottom quite a bit. Used to seeing him on top, losing position, attempting to go for a submission, and then his opponents are able to scramble out from underneath. So I like, as I said, RDR to win by KO, but also to win in round 3, 4, or 5, 10 to 1, 15 to 1, 22 to 1, respectively. You could alternatively play a same game parlay. RDR in the over 2.5 rounds is around plus 170. Billy, though, you're keeping it a little bit more simple here. You're taking RDR on the money line around minus 200, and then also his ITD prop inside the distance prop at around plus 110. Curious as to your price targets on those bets, and then how you break this one down and how you break down this matchup relative to the props that I gave out in terms of RDR potentially winning this fight later or as a live bet after round 1 or round 2 as well.
Yeah, I really liked the props you had, and my gut read was those things as well. The problem is I got too excited about RDR as soon as various markets came open. So I had already bet his money line basically 2 units to win one, and then another unit on his inside the distance prop. And I was like, all right, that's probably enough exposure to RDR in one event. Or I actually 100% agree with you. I think the late stop is more likely.
Cool.
I think I'd take his money line down to about minus 220 inside the distance anywhere with a plus. I'm good with that. The interesting thing I discovered, or not discovered, but came to the realization of watching Reinier de Ridder this week, is he's really tall for the division, and he's a better grappler and striker in the clinch. And that seems counterintuitive at first, but if I'm taller than you and you have to get close to me to hurt me, but also I'm going to kill you in the clinch, it's a very difficult problem to solve unless, you are also really good in the clinch or you're also as long as him. Neither guy is a great striker. I agree with you. Allen is the more technical striker. I think RDR has a little bit more power, also a little bit better durability at this point. He's been finished twice, but they were at light heavyweight and heavyweight. So that kind of nets out for me. And as soon as it gets close, the knees to the tummy from De Ridder, always a problem. And he's a high-level judo black belt who's, I think, been training judo for roughly 30 years at this point in his life. So you don't want to clinch with him. If he stands too far at range, he can hit you and you can't hit him. And then on the ground might be Allen's theoretical advantage, but as you pointed out, he does a really good job of not taking that advantage when he could have, and snatching defeat from the jaws of victory or snatching, giving away a round that he could have won because he does something stupid. There's enough of those factors. I'm not as worried about the short notice because he did have 5 weeks. It wasn't like they announced it last week, but it doesn't help, right? Like you'd still rather have 6, 7, 8, especially against a big awkward judo guy. So agree with you 100%. Those are my reads. I gave him out in my Monday article at minus 185. Loved that. It obviously moved towards De Ridder. Probably still does a little bit. Anything inside of minus 220 or so.
Even though you said you weren't too concerned about the short notice angle for Allen, I just wanted to go back to the live angle, the potential live angle here as well.
Yeah.
I'm expecting Allen's success to be a little bit more front loaded, especially once RDR starts wearing on him in the grappling or
Yeah.
kneeing him to the body. I think he is going to wear down a little bit. RDR is what I view as more of an attritional damage type of fighter as opposed to a single shot guy who's going to knock you out. I mean, he can get on top and finish the fight via ground and
Mhm.
pound quickly against anybody if you can't grapple, but I think he is more of an attritional stylistic fighter.
Yeah.
So in terms of a live bet, Allen wins round one or it's 1-1 after two. You think it's safe to enter an RDR at
Yeah.
that point?
Yeah, the only reason I guess I didn't think about that is I'm not all that confident that Allen wins an early round and
Mm-hmm.
even gives us a better price. Like there's a fighter we'll talk about later who's one of our favorite live betting opportunities. Just every event. I don't think it's that situation where RDR is especially likely to lose the early round and give you the price. If it's there, by all means, but I'm not banking on that necessarily.
Move on to our fight of the night between Kevin Holland and Mike Malott in the welterweight division. Now, we have talked a lot about betting Kevin Holland, who is a different fighter at welterweight as opposed to middleweight. But Billy and I are aligned here on Mike Malott at around a pick 'em price. The much smaller man, but the grappler in this matchup. Holland 2 inches taller, 8-inch reach advantage, but we do not trust his takedown defense. Just 56% for his career, and Malott is going to be proactively grappling here. 81% control rate for Malott in clincher grappling exchanges. This is a 28% control rate for Kevin Holland. Malott has some cardio concerns, but so does Holland in an extended fight, especially where he is going to be forced to grapple. Anytime Kevin Holland has been forced to grapple, he does tire out a little bit more quickly, and he's very grappleable here against Malott, who is a high level practitioner. So Holland, a very public pick this week. Public picking him around 60% of the time compared to a pick 'em price. I make Malott around minus 150 in my model as a result, and I'd bet him up to minus 135. Billy, did you have a similar read here just in terms
Yeah.
of anytime Holland's gone up against the grappler, the matchup has strongly favored the grappler in the past, and also not too concerned about the size differential, considering once they're going to be on the ground, the size and Holland's longer limbs may actually be to Malott's benefit down there.
Exactly. Yeah, I did a pretty deep dive on this from a technical and like tape standpoint for the article I'll have that comes out Saturday morning. Would encourage everyone to read that. The gist of it is Malott is very opportunistic, both with his striking and his grappling. Did a really good job against Neil Magny, who has the exact same proportions at distance using his kicks. He used like a really awkward push kick to the thigh, which I don't think I've ever seen before. Not the side kick that John Jones does sometimes, but almost like a pseudo stomp that was thrown off Neil Magny. Kevin Holland, also big, tall, long, skinny guy. You kick him in the legs, it's going to be a problem. I don't even think Holland uses his length as well as Magny does on the feet in terms of straight shots. Kevin Holland loves nothing more than to brawl with you. Mike Malott will wait patiently, seize those opportunities, and either get a takedown or pick him apart. My conclusion, though, in my article was that Kevin Holland, in theory, has the skills to win in this matchup. If Kevin Holland can grapple proactively, put Malott on his back, I think Kevin Holland would actually have a lot of success there. I just have zero confidence that Kevin Holland will take the smart choice rather than the let's go for fight of the night choice. And that's worked out well for him. That's why he's gets booked on every event he wants to be on, 5, 6 times a year, makes a ton of money. More power to him. But against a guy who's actually trying to win and trying to take the smartest path to victory, I'm going to take that. 100% agree with you on what I would make the line. Could also see a Malott finish. I'm worried about Holland's durability. He got dropped twice by D-Rod. Absolutely, that was the bad one for me. There's zero reason for him to be brawling with a guy who does that well. Holland got a takedown in that fight, dominated on the ground, and then never really went back to it. I just, I think the schedule and the weight cut at welterweight and all the damage he's taken and the weird little rib injuries and arm bars and whatever are all starting to add up for Kevin Holland. So Mike Malott minus 110 is great. Would play it good bit past that, as you pointed out.
Yeah, this is already his fifth fight of 2025. He's mentioned wanting to get a sixth one in before the end of the year. I think the only way that happens is if he finishes Malak quickly or gets finished quickly himself. So hopefully Malott can take him
Get
down.
submitted quickly. Yeah.
Yeah, take him down, get the submission. Holland takes no damage and then is able to get back in the cage a couple of months later. That's my ideal, optimal outcome for this one. Before we move on, don't forget to sign up for Action Pro for real-time pick alerts from experts and our entire Action Network team. Plus, you can access our pro projections powered by Sean Kerner and our entire predictive analytics team. Just go to actionnetwork.com/pro and get $20 off the annual price with promo code POD20. Don't miss out on the best bets at the best prices. Visit actionnetwork.com/pro and use promo code POD20 to get $20 off a year of Action Pro. Let's move on to our favorite underdogs for this weekend. One we're in alignment on, three others we're going to give out across three different fights. The agreement comes on Kyle Prepelic against Drew Dober in the lightweight division. Prepelic 2 inches taller, not as much power as Dober, but he's never been KO'd. I think there's a chance he's the more durable of the two fighters. I say that with some hesitation because Dober historically has been incredibly durable, but we've seen the chin start to crack in his recent fights. And once the chin cracks, it generally does not go back. And Dober, pocket brawler, has the more efficient striking stats. But if you're going to take Prepelic in a pure striking fight where he's not going to get taken down, I think he's going to be competitive here. Dober averages 2 takedowns per 5 minutes of distance throughout his career, but he's only completed 9 of those 52 attempts, just the 17% takedown accuracy, and he's only controlled 30%, 37% of his grappling exchanges. So we saw Prepelic outgrappled by Benoit Saint Denis. That is not going to be how this fight plays out. Maybe Dober mixes in a takedown and wins one round with it, but in all likelihood, these two are likelier to brawl. I make Prepelic about plus 222 on the money line. You can get as high as plus 350. I like him down to plus 250. And then I also like the unders in this fight. Ends inside the distance is minus 200. Under 2.5 is minus 160. Under 1.5 is plus 155. I'll probably be on Prepelic and either the under or the ends inside the distance and hope that either we cash Prepelic by decision, he knocks out Dober, or we push because Dober knocks him out. So Prepelic and the unders for me between Prepelic and Dober. Billy, what are your thoughts on the total here? I know you like Prepelic on the money line, and then any other props you like for this matchup?
Yeah, I think Prepelic is the more likely decision winner. So I like
Mhm.
your approach there if you're trying to just make sure you make some money. If you're trying to really shoot for the moon, you probably don't do that because not that Prepelic couldn't finish him. It kind of anyone could finish Drew Dober at this point. The chin, I don't think is there anymore. But I think you're increasing you're making it a safer play by doing it that way. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Prepelec, very durable, never been knocked down in either of his stints in the UFC, never been knocked out at any point in his career. He's fought some very tough strikers in the amateur days that aren't listed on the Tapology because he was fighting over here in Michigan when it wasn't sanctioned. And I watched him do really well against some high-level strikers in those days back then. He's still going at it. Hasn't really taken any damage, so even though he's about the same age as Dober, you don't really worry about it. And I'm going to reference this in another fight shortly, but seems like both Drew Dober and Matt Frivola just were kind of done after their fight against each other. It's just they both hit a wall there. Dober's on a 3-fight losing streak, been knocked out in 2 of those 3. So not going great for him. His style has always relied heavily on taking one to give one, and he just can't take the one anymore. So yeah, love Prepelec at a big juicy price.
Flyweight division, Bruno Silva against Hyun-Sung Park. Another fight that I like to end inside the distance, and also I'm taking the underdog game. The ITD here is around minus 120 to minus 150, so a lot more reasonable. Under 2.5 a pick'em price. I project the ITD around minus 175 between these flyweights. So flyweight violence matchup. Now, Park is the taller man, 3 inches taller, 1 inch reach advantage. Silva accustomed to being the shorter man in his matchups, but a longtime training partner of Henry Cejudo and the Pitbull brothers, and some very high level losses as well. Last 3 losses have come to Josh Van, Manel Kopp, and Tagir Ulanbekov. So losing to elite competition, beating guys generally beneath him. He has power, he has submission abilities. Park should be the better athlete. He's younger, he should be quicker, but he did get knocked down in 2 different Road to UFC fights. He was in a competitive striking match with Shannon Ross before he knocked out Ross via Ross's glass chin, one of the worst chins in the history of the promotion. And if Silva grapples here, I think Park could potentially get stuck on bottom. So expect competitive striking exchanges. I think Silva has the ability to hurt Park. Park should be the better athlete, the quicker man, and I'd say is likelier potentially to win a decision. But I make Silva around plus 120 here. You can get as high as plus 180, plus 190. I like him down to plus 130. And then I also like, as I said, the ends inside the distance to around minus, call it minus 165, considering I make that minus 175. I may just play the under at a pick and price instead. So Billy, Bruno Silva, Hyung Sung Park in a flyweight bout. Any leans or bets for you here?
Yeah, love the inside the distance. Park's only career loss is also to a high level guy in Tetsuro Taira, so there's a weird bit of symmetry here where they've both beaten not great competition and then lost when they fight top five-ish fighters or top 10-ish, depending on where you draw those lines. Love the inside the distance. Bruno Silva's been knocked out twice in the past year, which is scary because he likes to stand in there and trade. Hyung Sung Park is a walking Korean stereotype where he's going to get knocked down, he's going to get up again, he might knock you down. We'll probably do that 3 or 4 times, see who ends up standing. Um, if Bruno Silva had not suffered 2 knockout losses, or even if he had taken 6 months off after the last one, I'd feel better about him as the dog shot. As it stands now, I think the inside the distance is the sharp way to go.
Manon Fiorot against Jasmine Jasudavicius, one of the best fights on the card, women's flyweight bout. I'm going with Jasudavicius here. She is full grappling upside at plus money. Also is the bigger fighter, 3-inch reach advantage. But Fiorot has proven a very difficult out for this style of matchup. 88% career takedown defense. Aaron Blanchfield was unable to get her to the round. Different grappling style between Jasudavicius as compared to Blanchfield. But Fiorot proven the better striker as well, outlanding opponents by nearly 2 strikes per minute at distance. Jasudavicius, on the other hand, getting outlanded by about the same margin, about 1.8 strikes per minute at distance. This fight, though, is heavily juiced to reach a decision north of minus 350. Always like having the underdog in those type of matchups. Jasudavicius value by decision, but also on her money line as well. I make her around plus 180. I saw as high as plus 200 or so. I like her down to plus 190. Not a particularly big bet, but taking all of the grappling upside at plus money, generally the way I like to allocate my bets. Billy Fiorot against Jasudavicius. As I said, one of my favorite fights on this
Yeah.
card, and Jasmine really has the chance to launch herself into title contention if she's able to pull off this upset. Do you think she's capable of doing so? And any other bets that you may like on this fight?
I think she's capable. I don't think she's necessarily likely. Fioro's just so much more physical than most of the women in this division that the only person who really had success taking her down is Shevchenko, who's also just a, monster of a person for 125 pounds. My initial read was I was really interested in Jasudavicius's point spread line. Maybe she finds a takedown in one round or just does some cage push, kind of boring fight stuff and wins run. They price that at minus 170.
Yeah.
So the books, yeah, books are onto that one. Kind of once I saw that price, I just moved on from this fight because that was my real read. And yeah, they're doing a better job on those, to say the least.
Yeah, as I said, that distance prop is juiced up near minus 350. I actually project value on the fight to go to a decision. So maybe as a parlay piece or something like that. Probably not something I'm going to end up betting, but that is the
Yeah.
reason why the point spread is so juiced up. It's
Mhm.
likely to go to a decision, and Jasmine is likely to win one of the 3 rounds. As a result, you have to lay a pretty big price on her to do so. So yeah, I would take money line or pass, and if I'm betting the money line, it's not going to be a particularly big wager. I do think this is a difficult stylistic matchup for her. Wish it was 5 rounds as well. If this was 5 rounds instead of
Yeah.
three, I'd be a little bit more interested at this price. I think she's going to be a better 5 round fighter than a 3 round fighter, but all the same, it's a tough stylistic matchup for
Mhm.
Jasudavicius. Move on to the middleweight division. Azamet Bakoyev against Yusri Belgori. Belagori. Belagori is a former Glory kickboxer, previously faced Israel Adesanya, Alex Pereira, other high-level kickboxing opponents. Transition to MMA, has been training in Connecticut with Pereira and Glover Teixeira and the other guys at that gym. He's the bigger man, 5 inches taller, 7-inch reach advantage, but there's a mystery and an unknownness as to whether he is capable of grappling at all. Azamat Bakoyev trains full time at ATT. As I said, he's the smaller man, but he is reliable here in this matchup to wrestle and look to get on top against Belagori. I think Belagori potentially, may end up moving up to 205 at some point too. He's just humongous. I don't even know how he's making 185. It's kind of like when Pereira was making 185 at his
Yeah.
size and frame. You're like, I don't know how he's doing it. It seems detrimental that he would be doing so, and he may end up being better ultimately moving up to 205. So we'll see if, moving or it's necessary for him to move divisions first. And if he does move, whether the speed differential closes, whether the grappling isn't as much of a problem against the light heavyweight division, but against guys who can grapple at middleweight, I do think it's going to be an issue. I like the under though, or the ends inside the distance here. It's juicy. It's minus 220. But the under 2.5 minus 156, the under 1.5 plus 135. I think there's violence in this fight because it does seem pretty binary in terms of how it may play out. Either Bogori is able to keep the fight on the feet and somebody probably falls, or Bakoyev is able to take him down and finishes him on the mat. I do project value on Bakoyev to win by KO. I make that about plus 225. You can get as high as plus 290. As I said, I prefer the unders though, and you're going with the dog shot here on Usuri. Where do you like his money line down to, and how do you see this one playing out?
Yeah, I think I got plus 260. Wouldn't go much beyond that. There's two pieces to this. One, this is the first time we're seeing the very, very tall and long Belgori in the full-sized UFC cage. We've only seen him at the Apex.
Hmm.
I think that really, really helps him here. And the other part is Bakoev, despite his name, is not a Dagestani grappler. He's more of a well-rounded MMA fighter who will grapple and almost certainly will grapple here, but he's not Habib, he's not Islam, who like that's plan A through Z. I think that helps Belgori here. He was able to get up once from being taken down by Marco Tulio in his first shot on the Contender Series. Better takedown defense than you would imagine. And he's had a year since we've seen him training with some really high level grapplers. Hopefully they did the smart thing and are like, we're not going to worry about defending takedowns. We're just going to worry about getting back up. I always like when not comfortable grapplers just focus on, hey, I'm going to get taken down. What do we do then? Can't swear to that, but a lot of respect for Glover, obviously, as a coach and a fighter. So just banking on some improvement here, the bigger cage, and then Bekaev maybe not being quite the grappler that we might assume based on the sound of his name, which is a heavy part of MMA handicapping these days. When you see Russian sounding names like that, we kind of think we know what we're getting, and it's not always true.
Speaking of elite names, we've got an elite nickname entering the UFC
Yes.
this weekend. Melissa Scare Croden. Elite nickname, just going with the scare. We didn't try to scare Croden it. We just went with the scare. That's how you do it. That's how you nickname a fighter. Going up against Tainara Lisboa, women's bantamweight fight. Scare Croden making her UFC debut. We'll just call her Croden from now. We don't need to keep up with the bit, but she has
Mm,
moved from a favorite, or she has moved from dog money to a favorite. Lisboa was a very popular underdog selection this week. People picking the Brazilian to win this fight around 70% of the time. So considering the market has moved towards Croden, but it seems like the vast majority of public picks are on Lisboa, the Brazilian. It does seem like Croden the clear side. I make her closer to minus 200 than I do to minus 120 where she's currently lined. I'd probably bet her based on my projection up to around minus 175. You can even call it minus 150 to have a much more reasonable cutoff. I also, though, like the GTD prop in this fight. I make that around minus 220. I think that's minus 175. And Croden by decision at plus 220 aligns obviously with the correlation on Croden's money line and the fight to go to a decision. You took Croden in your luck rankings earlier this
yeah.
week at plus money. Where do you like her to, and how do you see this fight playing out?
Yeah, I think I'd probably still play it. I was basically just doing my best Sean Zerillo impression, looking at the Tapology picks and that the line had already moved that way, realizing what was happening. The other thing, she's a direct signee to the UFC at
Mm-hmm.
women's bantamweight, not contender series, not making her jump through any hoops. That's usually a good sign. Full disclosure, I've watched 0 minutes of Scarecrow tape, although she's won her last two by knockout. The opponents she's facing in LFA aren't really all that different than the lower end of UFC women's bantamweight. So like if you can do it there. Her last loss was to Jacqueline Cavalcanti, which is not a bad deal.
Mm-hmm.
Everything kind of checked out that way. And then not sure if you saw it, but I also tweeted on Monday that my new favorite UFC nickname had just dropped with a link to Scare Croden's Tapology page because you're right. We're not running it into the ground. We're not forcing it. We're letting people figure it out, much like Mario Pinto pretending to not speak English, then cutting a 7 minute UFC promo last week. It was just perfect. Like he He didn't then go back and reference and say he was just kidding. He just let it go. Sounded just like Michael Bisping too, same accent. It was tremendous.
Tease the bit, don't overcommit to the bit. Give
Yeah.
people enough to make them chuckle, and then yeah, pull back on it. A couple fights that we like from a prop perspective before we get into our best bets, though. The props may bleed into the best bets, so I'll do my best to keep them separate for now. Charles Jourdain against Davy Grant in the bantamweight division, one of the more exciting fights on the card. I think this could be potentially, if you're betting the inside the distance, a fight where you're screaming at the TV for 15 minutes, hoping that somebody finishes, and ultimately it ends up seeing the scorecards. Because I do make this about minus 240 to go to a decision. I also like Jourdain by decision at plus 170. I make his line closer to plus 120, but you could just bet the fight to go to a decision around minus 165. These two are matched up pretty similarly. The big differential here is the age. Grant is 10 years older. Jourdain 29, Grant 39. They're actually both about to turn 30 and 40 respectively. Jourdain the better striking stats, outlanding opponents by 2 strikes per minute at distance. Grant closer to 0.7. Jourdain the slight grappling positional edge as well, 46 versus 42% career. And he also averages more takedowns per 5 minutes at distance. Grant actually hasn't even shot a takedown in several years. So I think Jourdain just has more ways to win the fight. I think the striking will be relatively competitive. I think he'll get more top time and win on control and swing the fight that direction. But I do like the fight to go all 15 minutes. Would lay that up to about minus 200 compared to a projection of minus 240. Billy, Davy Grant versus Charles Jourdain. Any bets for you here?
I lean Davy Grant. I haven't pulled the trigger. Both of his last two losses were split decisions, and he hasn't lost any other way in more than 4 years now. Charles Jourdain, three of his last four wins are guillotines, which drives me crazy because it's not all that hard to not get guillotined. If you have a goes to decision prop, you are going to be freaking out when the announcers pretend some crappy guillotine is an imminent threat to Davy Grant. I think he'll probably get out of them, but it will still be scary, especially if you're only half watching and listening to Cormier or whoever freak out about a guillotine that has no chance. So yeah, those are my reads. I like the goes to decision. It's going to be a stupid sweat though.
It will
Like you're
be,
going to be annoyed, but I
especially if
think
they
he'll
end up
get there.
scrambling, because Grant has some pretty good chokes and
Hmm.
scrambles too. So I think there may be a scramble in this fight where they're both just like trying to lock in a choke on one another, and the announcers are screaming,
Yeah.
and they're not even sure who has the better of the choke position. You may also go, what's the what is it? The guillotine to the arm triangle? Is that like the guy guillotining on bottom gets arm triangled from top? Is that the transition that guys try to move to?
Oh, the Von Flue choke or the Von
The
Prue
Von
choke. It's all
Flu.
kind of the same thing. Yeah. If you pass guard, it can become an arm triangle. You can choke people out right from guard or half guard if you're heavy enough pressure. Obviously, OSP, Ovin St. Preux, remade it famous after Jason Von Flue did in the early 2000s because you just drive that shoulder in. Your arm is already kind of across by attempting to get the sub. I don't think that works as well with smaller guys because you need like kind of some big shoulders to drive in there.
Okay.
Wouldn't be too worried about that, but still just stop jumping guillotines and ended up on the bottom. It almost never works.
Yeah, he is a very good guillotine. It seems to keep working. I would imagine since it's worked three of the past four times he's tried it,
I
I'd
know.
imagine he will try it again here. The Dustin Poirier strategy, just keep firing off the guillotine, and eventually it'll end up sinking in. I don't think Dustin ever won by guillotine in his career, by the
Nope.
way. But yeah, I would expect Jourdain to jump it at some point in this fight, considering it's kept working. Marlon Chito Vera against Ayman Zahabi. Bantamweight fight. It is the featured bout on the card. Chito 2-inch reach advantage, but Zahabi has the better and more efficient striking stats for their respective careers. Zahabi just getting outlanded, zero point 0.1 strikes per minute. Chito closer to 1.5 strikes per minute, and largely that differential is coming in the first round because Chito does tend to be a slow starter, but he also gets out grappled too. In terms of control rate in the grappling, Zahabi 65% of the grappling time. Cheeto's control just 35% his grappling exchanges. He's 4 years younger. He's always worth a live bet after round one, considering he does start slow and does tend to pick up the pace in the back half of his fights. But this is a 3 round fight, not a 5 round fight. Cheeto did mention wanting to start a bit more aggressively this week, so I'm curious to see if he changes up his tempo. I do project an edge on him to win by decision. I'm not super confident in playing it, but I make him around plus 220 by decision. You can get as high as plus 275 in a fight that is lined between minus 300 and minus 350 to go to a decision. So expecting a relatively close and competitive fight between these two. Zahabi does seem to have these statistical edges on paper in terms of being able to mix things up and win this fight with top time. But if they're just going to strike it out for 15 minutes, I think Cheeto has basically a coin flip chance of winning a decision here. As I said, plus 275 is the projection or the listed number. I make it around plus 220. Cheeto by decision, my one lean here. Do you have any bets on Cheeto Vera against Amin Zahabi?
No, as I alluded to above, it's Cheeto Live. It's always Cheeto Live. I was actually interested in his point spread. He's the underdog, right? Typically, you get the plus 3.5 rounds. DraftKings has Marlon Vera with the minus side of the default point spread, minus 3.5 rounds at plus 180. I think basically suggesting that Vera has the stoppage upside here, whereas Zahabi is more likely to win a decision. You mentioned the grappling stats for Zahabi. He's landed one takedown in 9 UFC fights, only attempted, I think, 8 or 9 total. So he doesn't force that. I just don't know what he's especially good at. He's okay at everything, and if you make a mistake, he'll capitalize on that, but he's not like really forcing anything all that well. He also got dropped by the ghost of Jose Aldo as recently as May, and is somehow many years older than Marlon Vera, which you wouldn't think given how long they've been around, but Vera is 5 years younger. Has been off for about a year, which normally I don't like. Think it's actually good for Cheeto because he was taking a lot of damage and pushing the pace. That probably helps him. Yeah, still somehow only 33 years old. So all good things for Vera. I could justify an underdog pre-fight pick, but as with every Cheeto fight, live after round one, kind of can't go wrong. If you get a worse price because he won the round, then he just needs to win one of the next two. If you get a better price because he lost it, that's kind of what we're expecting anyway.
Zahabi's best skill seems to be convincing his opponents to engage in staring contests for long periods of time. I don't know what it is about his style. It's not like he carries huge power. It's not like he's, some explosive takedown artist and guys want to keep their distance. But for whatever reason, all of his fights tend to be very low pace staring contests at range. And he's able to just lull these guys into a fight at his pace because he's not some high volume striker either. He kind of wants a lower volume kickboxing match, especially in front of home fans where as long as he keeps the fight close, the judges may end up giving him the nod on the scorecards. He's going to be getting the bigger reaction from the crowd. He's not from Eastern, or he's not from Western Canada. He's very much from Eastern Canada. So it's slightly different in terms of the geographics, but certainly still the home fighter, quote unquote, who will be getting the pop from the crowd anytime anything is close. If you're on Twitter, we have a great new feature. If you see a bet from any of your favorite action experts or anyone on gambling Twitter, you can now tag at Playbook and tell our bot to build you a bet slip at a book of your choice. It will build it out for you with a quick slip link that opens right up to your sportsbook. So keep an eye out for a new tool at Playbook on Twitter. Also line shop for you as well. Get you the best available odds. We're going to move into our best bets. Billy's still got a prop here, though, on my fight that has a best bet in it. I've got a prop on his best bet fight, too. So we'll have some back and forth here in our best bet fights. My best bet fight is Cody Gibson against Aori Kilang in the bantamweight division. Gibson 3 inches taller, 2-inch reach advantage. He is 6 years older, but I view him as the much more well-rounded fighter. Also has the better cardio, in my opinion, too. But outlanding opponents, 0.6 strikes per minute, minus 1.4 for Aori Kilang. Grappling control, 55% for Gibson, just 31% for Aori. He's never been KO'd. Aori doesn't have humongous power or really a coherent submission game either. And as I said, I prefer Gibson's gas tank down the stretch here too. So pre-fight, I like Gibson on the money line. I project him around minus 250. Probably like him up all the way to minus 225. He's currently around minus 170 to minus 180. I like him live after round one as well. In the event that he drops the opening round, I view him as the fighter likelier to rally over the final 10 minutes to pick up the final two rounds. Billy, you're going with Aori Keeling's point spread, plus 3.5. What was the number that you got on that? And considering I like Gibson to win by decision, I'm perfectly okay with it. But where do you like it down to?
Yeah, I mean, not only do you like Gibson to win by decision, you laid out the exact scenario I'm hoping for, which is Arichi Kilang wins that first round, does a little bit more damage, whatever, however he does it, I don't really care, and then fades down the stretch. He's bigger, stronger, more dangerous of the two, a little bit more power. Not that either guy's a great striker. Been training at Team Alpha Male, so we're hoping. I believe he comes to Team Alpha Male for his U.S. camp. Not 100% on that. Hoping the grappling defense continues to get better.
I think he
And
trains
Cody,
at Fight Ready in Arizona. I'm pretty sure that's where
is that
he'll be
when he's
at.
here? Okay. Either way, higher level wrestling. Gibson just doesn't put people away. And Irichi Keelang, won one of 3 rounds against Raul Rosas in a vaguely similar stylistic matchup because if he can defend the takedowns, either defend a couple early while he's fresh or you tire yourself out wrestling. And he's going to be more active on the feet, bigger, stronger, hit harder. Just need him to get one. I got minus 155. Think I'd take it to about minus 175.
Yeah, apologies on the name pronunciation. I knew I was pronouncing it wrong as I was looking at it. I was like, I know it's not Aoriki Lang, Arichi Lang. Thank you for the correction. Apologies to any of our potential Chinese listeners. Didn't mean to butcher that name completely. I know it's Arichi Lang. I just, as I was reading it, I was like, I know this is not the pronunciation I've used previously. So thank you for the correction, Billy.
No
Your
problem.
best bet fight, Kyle Nelson against Matt Frivola, lightweight bout. Nelson moving up from 145 to 155, though, here. He's the more technical striker in this matchup in terms of strike differential. Gets outlanded by zero point 0.7 strikes per minute. Frivola, though, minus 1.3. Frivola, the better wrestler, he never uses it. He gets in the octagon, he starts swinging, he gets hit, he sees red, and he swings back. He averages 1.5 takedowns per 5 minutes of distance. I think if he came into his fights proactively grappling, he would be the favorite in most of his matchups. He's just unwilling to do so. He wants the swing. He wants to chase potentially beating his own lightweight record for quickest KO. He knocked out Terrence McKinney, I believe, in 7 seconds. He owns the UFC record for that first exchange KO. And I think he's been chasing that and that 50K bonus ever since. Now, I do expect these guys to kind of run at each other and swing at each other. And I do project value on Frivola's KO prop. I make it about plus 165. You can get as high as plus 230. But ultimately, I do think the under is probably the goods here. And if this fight extends out to a 15-minute matchup, I think Nelson has the advantage in terms of minute winning and technique, provided Frivola is not going to proactively grapple. So you like Nelson on the money line at plus money. Plus 102 is what you have in the sheet. Curious what your price target is on this fight, how you see it playing out. And then in terms of a live bet after round one, say Frivola wins round one, you get a big number on Nelson. If you're interested on Nelson in that point, considering he is moving up in weight class and theoretically should have a better gas tank than he has previously.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. I didn't really think about that from a live angle. I did think about that for Nelson from a durability angle.
Mm-hmm.
He's 5'11", so he's the taller man here. They're listed at the exact same reach. Nelson is 34, so a 5'11", 34-year-old or 33-year-old last time he competed, featherweight, you worry about the durability there. We talk about it all the time. These guys are big and long for the division. It eventually catches up to you and they start to kind of break down. Love the move up to 155 at his age. Think that helps his durability. Also agree with what you said about Matt Frivola not choosing to wrestle when he could. Not only would he be favored here if we trusted him to wrestle, but he also wouldn't have been badly knocked out in both of his last 2 fights had he spent more time wrestling instead of just planting his feet and chucking. As I referenced earlier, I think both Drew Dober and Matt Frivola, like that was it for them. Like that was the zenith of their career. They both left it all in the cage there because neither of them have looked even remotely the same since then. I like any version of the under. What I have in here now is fight doesn't start round three at minus 120, so finish in the first two. But seriously, any combination of that based on your risk, to reward tolerance and how much you want to tilt that, I'm fine with. Nelson, I'd play down to about minus 120. He is the more technical striker, less power, but also probably better durability, which in theory nets out. If they both hit each other an equal amount of times, it's basically a coin flip. Maybe he got more power, putting on a little bit of muscle coming up to 155. Can't say that for sure, but there's some hope for Nelson being better than he's looked in the past. I don't think there's a lot of reason to believe that Matt Frivola is going to do anything different, be any healthier, be any more durable than we've seen him at this point. So feels like we've seen peak Matt Frivola. We might get a couple more good years of Kyle Nelson.
In terms of staking, because you did have fight doesn't start round three under top props, you have Nelson is your best bet. Are you betting more on Nelson or are you staking those two the same? How do you view those bets relative to one another?
Yeah, I bet Nelson a little bit earlier in the week. I put half a unit on him at plus 110. I would do that half a unit on anything plus money, and then to win a half a unit on the under. So basically, you break even if a Matt Frivola knockout happens in the first 2 rounds, is kind of my hope there. And obviously, if Nelson gets the finish, hit both of those bets.
Couple fights that we didn't get to. Danny Barlow against Jordan Santos in the middleweight division, and Stephanie Rondina Luciano against Ravina Oliveira. You did mention the need, not even the desire, the need to bet against any fighter
Mhm.
who uses any version of Ronda in their nickname. We had
Yep.
Irina Alexeyeva a couple weeks ago, ended up losing, I believe, her fourth straight UFC fight. Luciano is the favorite here, but if you're looking Ronda Rousey as your idol in the year 2025, considering how far the sport has progressed since Rousey's peak, it might be a bad sign in general. But no bets for either of us on Luciano against Oliveira. Barlow against Santos is the fight. We wanted to focus on it briefly here at the end before we sign off for the weekend. Middleweight fight between Barlow and Santos. I believe Barlow is moving up, right, from 170 to
Yep.
185 for this matchup. Should still be the bigger man. I do project slight value on Barlow to win by KO. He is, in general, considered a KO artist. He's got the beautiful left hand to God nickname. He has a very aggressive style. Kind of reminds me of Chaos Williams to a degree, but like a
Yeah.
faster, more explosive, potentially Chaos. But Jordan Santos never been finished. He's a fighter I think is super talented, and he is the natural middleweight as well. So Barlow coming in here at a big favorite. If you're going to bet the fight, I'd bet Barlow by KO. I'm probably going to end up passing on this one though. Do you have any betting takes on Barlow versus Santos?
Yeah, I'm leaning towards Santos. I don't like the move up in weight class for a guy who relies so much on power and putting someone away because Danny Barlow has very little plan B, right? Like if
Hmm.
he hits you and you don't die, there's not a lot of other ideas coming from there. Santos can grapple pretty well. Santos also lost a decision to Ozzy Diaz, so that's why I haven't actually bet on him. Had that fight never happened and we just got him in coming off the Contender Series, I probably would have already bet Jordan Santos, but we also wouldn't be getting better than 2-1 odds had that not happened. So that fantasy world doesn't exist. Real quick on the Ronda thing, not only is it not a great idol at this point, but also these women doing that are not Olympic medalists who have won their first dozen fights in less than a minute by the same technique, even though everyone knows it's coming. So again, bad idol, but also extremely presumptuous when you're like 6-2 or whatever to be like, yeah, no, I'm little Ronda.
It's like the
That's
kids in youth
I'm the
hockey
greatest
wearing
fighter since
99.
then, despite no evidence.
It's like being a hockey player wearing 99. You're not Wayne Gretzky. You're not the great one. Take it off your
Yeah.
back. You don't deserve it. Put on 98 or something, or 97, 93. You got plenty other options that are at 99. You got plenty other nickname options that are not a iteration of Ronda Rousey. Maybe Stephanie Egger is allowed to use some sort of Ronda nickname, right? She's an Olympic judo background. But yeah, I think you need to medal in the Olympics or at least compete in the Olympics if you want to adopt some sort of Ronda Rousey iteration or derivative
Yep.
nickname. That'll do it for a UFC betting preview. You can find more UFC betting content on actionnetwork.com from both Billy and myself. And if you'd like to instantly tell some of the bets that we discussed on today's show, look for the quick slip links both in the podcast and video description or visit actionnetwork.com/bet now. Don't forget to download the free award-winning Action Network app and sign up for Action Pro for immediate access to expert picks and analysis. Best of luck with all your bets this weekend. Enjoy the violence. Thank you for listening. See you next time.